everyone, welcome back for another deep dive. Today we're going to be talking about something pretty heavy,
Yeah.
but very important, and that is racism.
Yeah.
And we are going to be looking at an article called Navigating Racism, a journey with Byron Katie's work.
Okay.
And we're going to see if her method, the work, can help us understand and maybe even dismantle racist beliefs.
Interesting.
What's really interesting to me about this is that it's not about politics or blame, it's about looking inward.
Yeah, it is counterintuitive, isn't it?
Yeah.
We often focus on external, systemic aspects of racism, which are important, but this approach says that real change begins with introspection.
So before we dive into Byron Katie and her method, I think it's important to acknowledge that you as the listener probably already have some understanding of what racism is.
Yeah.
But for this deep dive, let's look at how the article defines it.
Okay.
It says, racism is the belief that one race is inherently superior to another, and that leads to prejudice and discrimination. And it goes deeper than that. It highlights how this isn't just about individual actions, but how racism is embedded in our institutions and cultural norms.
That's a really crucial point.
Yeah.
The article emphasizes that racism is pervasive. It's not just a few bad apples.
Right.
It's woven into the fabric of society.
Yeah. And that damage is real. We're not talking about abstract concepts here. The article brings up a statistic that says in communities that are most affected by racism,
Right.
life expectancy can be drastically lower than predominantly white areas.
Absolutely. It highlights the reality that racism impacts people's lives in a number of ways.
Yeah.
It affects their health,
Yeah.
their opportunities, their sense of safety and belonging.
Yeah.
So it's heavy stuff for sure.
Yeah.
So where does Byron Katie and the work fit in?
Yeah.
The article talks about her as this unexpected but powerful voice in this conversation about racism.
Yeah.
She's an American author who developed this method based on her own journey out of severe mental distress.
Her story is pretty remarkable. She struggled with debilitating depression and anxiety for years.
Feeling trapped by her thoughts. And then suddenly she had this realization that her thoughts were the root of her suffering.
Hold on, I can already hear our listeners thinking, wait, my thoughts are the problem.
Right.
That sounds a little simplistic, doesn't it?
It does sound that way at first glance.
Yeah.
But Katie's insight was that it's not the external circumstances that cause us pain.
Okay.
It's our thoughts and beliefs about those circumstances.
Got it.
That's the foundation of the work. It's questioning our beliefs,
Okay.
particularly the ones that cause us stress and suffering,
Okay.
to uncover what she calls the truth
Okay.
and find a sense of freedom.
So we're not talking about positive thinking or ignoring reality.
Wow.
It's about examining those deeply held beliefs that might be shaping our perceptions and actions.
Exactly.
Especially when we talk about something as charged as racism.
And the work does this through 4 simple but powerful questions.
Okay.
Let's say, for example, someone holds the belief, and it's sadly a common one, people of a certain race are dangerous. The first question Katie proposes is it true?
Is it true? Wow, that's direct. I can imagine that would pick up a lot of defensiveness.
Yeah.
How do you even answer that, honestly?
That's the beauty of this approach.
Yeah.
It's not about judgment or blame. It's about genuine inquiry. It's about holding a mirror up to that belief and asking yourself, can I find concrete evidence to support this belief? Or is this based on stereotypes I've absorbed, stories I've heard,
Okay.
or even fears I haven't examined?
So it's about separating fact from fiction.
Yes.
Personal experience from societal programming.
Exactly.
But how do we know which is which?
That's a good question.
These beliefs can feel so ingrained, like a part of who we are.
Right, and that's where the second question comes in, and it goes even deeper. Katie asks, can you absolutely know that it's true?
Can you absolutely know it's true? This is so deceptively simple
It is.
because it challenges that certainty that underlies prejudice.
Exactly.
Absolute certainty is pretty rare, especially when it comes to complex social issues like race.
Yeah, and this is where things might start to feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Because it forces us to confront the possibility that our beliefs, the ones we've held onto for years, maybe even our whole lives,
Right.
might not be accurate.
This is getting really interesting.
Yeah.
But I think we need to unpack these a little bit more.
Yeah.
What happens after we've examined the truth of a belief? Where do those other 2 questions fit in?
Those are the questions that reveal the impact of these beliefs on our lives and how we interact with the world.
Okay.
But I think we need to save those for the next part of our deep dive.
All right, cliffhanger. We'll be back soon to explore the rest of Byron Katie's The Work and how it can help us navigate the complexities of racism. Don't go anywhere.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Mm.
We're continuing to explore Byron Katie's The Work and how it can help us understand and address racism.
Yeah, in the last part, we started to unpack those first two questions.
Right.
Is it true? And can you absolutely know it's true?
Right.
And how we can use them to challenge racist beliefs. Yeah, we left off with the idea that these questions can be really uncomfortable
They can.
because they make us face the possibility that our beliefs might not be accurate.
Yeah, and that's where the third question comes in, and this is where things get personal.
Mm-hmm.
Katie asks, how do you react what happens when you believe that thought?
Okay, so how does that question help us when it comes to racism specifically?
So let's imagine you have the belief, I can't trust people of a specific race.
Okay.
Now, that thought probably triggers certain reactions, certain
Okay.
feelings and behaviors.
Okay.
So this question invites you to examine those reactions without judgment.
Okay.
Do you feel anxious or fearful or angry?
Okay.
Do you avoid people of that race? Do you treat them with suspicion, even if you're not aware of it?
I see what you mean. It's like we're tracing the impact of that belief on our lives and how we interact with others.
Exactly.
But is it possible that those reactions are justified? Like, what if someone has had negative experiences that reinforce their distrust?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And the work doesn't dismiss those experiences at all,
Okay.
but it asks us to go a little deeper.
Okay.
Are those reactions serving you? Or are they helping you create the kind of world you want to live in?
Okay.
Or are they keeping you trapped in a cycle of fear and separation?
So it's not about blame or judgment. It's
Mm.
about understanding the impact of our beliefs and choosing how we respond.
Exactly.
I'm still grappling with this idea, though. What if those reactions are so deeply ingrained, almost unconscious?
Right.
How can we change something we're not even aware of?
That is a great question, and that's where the fourth and final question comes in.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I think the power of the work really shines through.
Okay.
Katie asks, who would you be without that thought?
Who would you be without that thought? That's a complete shift in perspective.
It is. It's about imagining ourselves free from the constraints of that belief.
Yeah.
So instead of asking, how can I change this about myself?
Right.
It's more about, what would it be like to not have this belief? So imagine just for a moment what your life would be like if you didn't carry the belief that you can't trust people of a specific race.
Mm.
How would you interact with them differently? What new possibilities might open up in your relationships, your community, even your own sense of self?
I'm starting to see how powerful this could be. It's not about pretending we don't have biases.
Right.
It's about exploring who we could be without those limitations.
Exactly.
This all sounds pretty abstract, though. Do you have any real-life examples of how this has actually played out for people?
Yeah, the article shares a really moving story about a person who experienced racial discrimination at work.
Oh, wow.
And they were understandably angry and hurt and carrying a lot of resentment towards the person who discriminated against them.
Yeah, that sounds really painful. How did the work help in that situation?
Well, through those four questions,
Okay.
they began to see that their suffering wasn't just about that event that happened,
Right.
but about their own thoughts and beliefs about what had happened.
So instead of blaming the other person, they turned inward
Yes.
and examined their own reactions.
Exactly.
That must have taken a lot of courage.
It did. And what's even more remarkable is that through that process, they were able to let go of that resentment,
Wow.
not just toward the other person, but toward themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They realized that they'd been holding on to so much anger and pain, and that letting go of those feelings actually freed them.
That's a powerful example of how this work can lead to healing on a personal level, but also in our relationships with others.
Yeah.
Makes me wonder, are there other ways that the work can be applied to address racism beyond these individual experiences?
That's a great question, and it's something we'll definitely explore in the final part of our deep dive.
Okay.
Can this personal transformation, this shift in perspective, actually contribute to dismantling racism on a bigger scale?
Right.
We'll explore that and more when we come back.
We're back for the final part of our deep dive into navigating racism with Byron Katie's The Work. And we've talked about it a lot,
We have.
from questioning our own beliefs to the potential for personal healing.
Yeah. But I think there's a big question lingering.
Yeah.
Can this kind of individual work actually make a difference when we talk about something as big as systemic racism?
That's a question a lot of people grapple with.
Right.
How can changing our own thoughts and beliefs possibly dismantle something that has been around for centuries?
Yeah.
But the article actually makes a really compelling argument that personal transformation is not only essential, but also a catalyst for that broader social change.
I'm curious to hear more about that.
Okay.
How does it connect those dots?
Well, it highlights something we touched on earlier, the power of empathy.
Uh-huh.
The article argues that when we do the work honestly
Right.
and with a lot of depth, that it cultivates a greater capacity for empathy.
So understanding our own biases might make us more sensitive to the experiences of others.
Right.
But how does that translate into actual change?
Yeah.
Because sometimes empathy is seen as passive,
Right.
like a way to avoid taking real action. That's true. And it's important to acknowledge that empathy on its own isn't enough.
Right.
But the article suggests that true empathy,
Okay.
the kind that comes from self-inquiry, is not passive. It can actually fuel action.
Okay.
Think about it. When we can step into someone else's shoes, when we can see the world through their eyes, when we can feel what they're feeling,
Right.
it becomes much harder to dehumanize them,
Yeah.
to dismiss their pain, or to turn away from injustice.
It's like that saying, you can't hate someone whose story you know.
Exactly. And the article says that empathy can even lead to changes in our behavior.
Oh.
It makes us more likely to challenge racist jokes,
Okay.
or to speak up against discrimination, or even support policies that promote equity and inclusion.
So it's not just about feeling bad for someone or understanding their struggles.
Right.
It's about understanding leading to concrete actions
Exactly.
that create real change.
It's about dismantling those racist structures
Yeah.
and creating a world that's more just.
I like that this is starting to paint a more hopeful picture.
Yeah.
Instead of feeling overwhelmed by this huge problem of systemic racism,
Yeah.
we can focus on our own sphere of influence,
Right.
starting with ourselves and our thoughts and actions.
Exactly.
But how do we bring this into the real world? How do we start having those difficult conversations about race
Right.
in a way that's productive
Right.
and doesn't shut people down?
The article gives a suggestion.
Okay.
Start by asking someone, what has your experience been with race?
What has your experience been with race?
Yeah.
It's so straightforward.
It is.
No judgment,
No.
accusation.
It's just curiosity.
It's just genuine curiosity.
And it lets people share their own perspective and experience
Right.
without feeling pressured.
Yeah.
It creates space for that honest dialogue.
Which can be so powerful.
It can.
Even if those experiences are different from our own,
All right.
we don't have to have all the answers.
Yeah.
We can just start by listening,
And
learning, and being willing to have those tough conversations.
exactly.
This has been such an eye-opening deep dive.
It has.
It's given me a whole new way to think about how to approach racism,
Yeah.
both within myself and out in the world.
It's about that inner work,
Yeah,
which is challenging,
it can be.
but it can also be very freeing.
What's the most important takeaway for you?
I think it's the reminder that racism isn't just about dismantling external systems. It's about transforming our internal world as well.
And as we've talked about today, that personal transformation can have a ripple effect that goes beyond ourselves.
So if personal transformation can contribute to dismantling systemic racism, what one belief will you apply the work to this week?
That's a good question for all of us to think about.
How might that one small act of courage create a more equitable world for everyone?
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thank you.
Until next time, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep working towards a more just and compassionate world.